Yes, thank you, Diane. I hope you can all see my screen.
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Okay, perfect. Okay, so hello, everyone. My name is Ines Pauwells, and together with Anne, I work on the day-to-day coordination of the Global PPS project. In the previous sessions, you have heard everything there is to know about the point prevalence survey methodology and on how you can go about it and collect data in your hospital. But then, of course, indeed, the next step would be to go and take a look at your results and to use them to inform stewardship in your hospital. So that is what we will talk about here. And I will just start by showing you what the output looks like for global PPS. As Anne already mentioned actually earlier, there are many different possibilities of getting your data once you've entered them online. So the first option is the export of the Excel file, and so this can be particularly useful, for example, if you go and export it right before data validation, so then you can do a cross-check of all the patients, are all the patients' information entered, are all the prescriptions entered, and then you can proceed to data validation. And then afterwards you can use it as a database in case you would like to do your own analysis. And so the Excel itself, we have made it so that it is as easy as possible for you to do your own analysis. We've added some extra variables, such as the ATC code and the aware classification to help you with that. And I will talk a little bit more about the aware classification later. But then, and I think this is also important to know, is that we have the feedback reports in PDF. So what happens here is that once you have entered all your data, once you have validated the data, you can go online in the application, and then you can generate a report. And then in the background, a statistical software program calculates the results for you. And then this feedback report will be sent to you by email in the next couple of minutes. So what you will have then is a full report in PDF, which lists your most important point prevalence survey results in a set of graphs and tables. And so it will have your own hospital data, but it will also have the benchmarking data. And so by benchmarking data, we mean the data of your country, of your continent, or of the same hospital type, for example, all tertiary hospitals within your continent. And so you can use this data for comparison. And so this report is actually developed to support local communication of your point prevalence survey results. So you can use it if you would like to present your PPS results, for example, to the hospital stewardship committee. And so, as Anne already mentioned, the feedback report has many different, comes in many different formats. So the most important one is the 1-point feedback. And we call it the 1-point feedback because it's already available for you after you have participated in Global PPS once. And so you can go and download it. And then we have the longitudinal feedback, which becomes available to you as soon as you have participated more than once. And so you can see the evolution of your results over time. And then finally, if you participate with a set of hospitals, you can go and download a merged feedback report, which will then show you the aggregated results for all your hospitals. And so in the next couple of slides, I will just show you some examples of what these reports look like. And then we will go further to how you can use them for antimicrobial stewardship. So this is a first example of a slide, so a page in the 1-point feedback report. I hope you can see it clearly. I will just walk you through it. So it shows the antimicrobial prevalence on adult wards for a certain hospital. As you see in red, these are the hospital data. And so for this case, for this specific hospital, you see that they have a hospital-wide antimicrobial prevalence on adult wards of 43.5%. So that means that at the time of the PPS, 43.5% of the admitted patients were on antimicrobials. And so then you have it for the entire hospital. And then as you can see, you have it also by ward type. So AMW means adult medical ward, then we have hemato-oncology, adult medical ward, and so on. And then below that, you can see the benchmarking data. So for country, continent, and hospital type. On this slide is a little bit the same principle, but a little bit more detailed in terms of classes of antimicrobials. It's for another hospital. Here you can see that the overall antimicrobial use prevalence is higher. It's 67.1%. And here you also have it split up by antimicrobial group. So as we talked about this morning, Global PPS also surveys anti-TB, anti-malarial, and antiretroviral drugs. So these prevalences, you can find them in the report as well. And then again, you have the benchmarking data. Okay, so this is another example which gives you quite some information, more specifically on the quality indicators. And so again, you see the hospital results marked in red. And the quality indicators, they are reported by activity here. So we have medical wards, surgical wards, and ICU wards. And then for each activity, you have the respective quality indicators related to antibiotic prescribing. So reasoning notes, that's the percentage of prescriptions with a documented reason in the patient notes. Guidelines missing is a percentage with a missing guideline. Guideline compliance, I think that is pretty straightforward. And then stop review date documented. This is the percentage of prescriptions with a documented stop or review date in the notes as well. And so then you have the benchmarking data again. Yeah, so we recently also added in the report a series of slides where we use the WHO aware classification to visualize patterns of antibiotic prescribing based on PPS results. And so before I show an example of such a slide, I will briefly explain a little bit what the aware classification is for those of you who are not familiar with it. So a couple of years ago, the WHO released the aware classification where they classified all the antibiotics that were available worldwide into 4 categories based on their role in first or second choice for certain infectious syndromes, and also based on their risk of selecting for resistance. So the first category is the access category. This includes the first or second choice antibiotics for empiric treatment of the most common infections, and they generally have a lower risk of resistance selection. So for example, amoxicillin or cloxacillin are access antibiotics. Then we have the watch antibiotics. These are the first or second choice antibiotics for limited indications only, but nevertheless quite important antibiotics. But they generally have a higher risk of resistance selection. For example, the quinolones, the carbapenems, and the cephalosporins of the second and third generation are all watch antibiotics. And then finally, we have the reserve antibiotics, and these are the so-called last resort antibiotics, such as colistin. And then at the end of 2019, a fourth category was added by WHO, and this was the category not recommended. And so this category includes mainly fixed dose combinations of broad spectrum antibiotics that are not actually recommended in clinical practice. And so with this in the back of our heads, I will just show you the following slide. This is an example again of a feedback slide you get after you have entered global PPS data. So this is a slide specifically for pneumonia. You see for this hospital, I don't think you can read the percentages, but I will read them out to you. So in this hospital, 65% of all the antibiotic prescriptions for pneumonia were for watch antibiotics, and 35% were for excess antibiotics, and there were no reserve antibiotics in this hospital. And then again below, you can see the benchmarking data. If you participate in the optional healthcare associated infections module, you will get some additional slides, such as this one. So for the optional healthcare associated infections module, we focus on the presence of invasive devices. You see here, for example, the number and percentages of admitted patients with one of these invasive devices. For example, here we see in this hospital, this is quite high, so 54.9% of all admitted patients had a peripheral vascular catheter. And this is, in this case, probably linked with high use of parenteral antibiotics and drugs. And this is another example of such a feedback slide from the optional healthcare associated infections module. Here you can see that in this hospital, about 1 in 4 patients, admitted patients, had an indwelling urinary catheter. So these findings can be also really important, for example, if you would like to make a link with infection prevention control. Then here you see some examples of the longitudinal feedback report. So again, we have the antimicrobial prevalence for a certain hospital, and you can see the evolution over time. And then below, you also see the evolution over time of the relative use of certain classes of antibiotics. So that is also something that is available to you. Okay, I will stop here and I will give the word back to Diane, who will talk a little bit more about antimicrobial stewardship.